Every time I stay at my grandparents' house, I hear footsteps upstairs. I've been hearing them for years, and the unsettling part is that nobody actually sleeps up there. The house is old, older than almost anything else in town, and it sits tucked away behind a wall of trees, far enough from the road that it gets unnervingly quiet at night. During the day, it's perfectly normal. My grandparents have lived there for as long as I can remember, and some of my best childhood memories were made within those walls. But once the sun goes down, the atmosphere shifts. I don't know how else to put it, but there was always something about the second floor that unnerved me. It wasn't one specific thing. It was just a feeling. The kind of feeling that makes you pick up your pace when you're walking alone, or makes you avoid staring down a long hallway for too long. When I was a kid, I flat out refused to go upstairs by myself. I'm 36 now, and honestly, I still won't. The second floor only has a few rooms, but there was one that always felt off. It was a long, narrow bedroom at the very end of the hall. The moment you stepped inside, the energy changed. It had closets on both sides of the door, a bed positioned near the center, and a single window at the far end that looked out into the dark woods. Growing up, my grandparents used to tell me a story about that room. They said that long before they bought the place, the previous owner's children claimed they'd see something emerging from one of the closets at night. Not a person, not an animal, just something. They'd lie there, watching it move around the room before it slid back into the closet. I always wrote it off as one of those old tall tales meant to scare kids. At least that's what I told myself. Everything changed when I was about 14. My grandparents had started sleeping in separate rooms, so instead of my usual spot, they put me in a guest room on the first floor, directly beneath that upstairs bedroom. The first night felt fine. I went to bed, clicked off the lamp, and just lay there in the dark. The house was dead silent. No TV, no talking, no passing cars. Just the occasional settling creak you expect from an old building. But then I heard it. Thump. A few seconds later, thump, then another. The sound was coming from right above my head. At first, I figured one of my grandparents had just gotten up, but then I realized that didn't make sense. Their rooms were on the first floor too. I stayed perfectly still, listening. The footsteps continued, slow, steady, unhurried. It sounded like someone was pacing from one side of the room to the other. I could track the movement across the ceiling, step by step, until it finally stopped. Silence. I sat there, frozen, waiting. After a couple of minutes, I tried to rationalize it. It's just an old house settling, I thought. That's what everyone says. I tried to force myself to relax, but then the footsteps started again. This time, they began from the exact opposite side of the room, the same spot where they had just stopped. The sound crossed over me again, slow, deliberate, like something was pacing back and forth, back and forth. I remember staring up at the ceiling, barely daring to breathe. I know what a house creaking sounds like, and this wasn't it. This was the weight of someone walking. Eventually, the fear became too much. I climbed out of bed and went to my grandfather's room to tell him someone was upstairs. He barely even looked up. "It's an old house," he said dismissively. "It creaks." He turned on the light in the dining room just outside my door and told me to try to get some sleep. I wanted to believe him. I went back to my room, and for a while it was quiet. Then it started again, but this time it wasn't pacing. It was moving toward the stairs. I could follow every single step through the ceiling. Then I heard the first step on the wooden stairs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Silence. The sound paused on the landing. Every muscle in my body tightened. Then it continued. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The footsteps reached the first floor. My floor. I sat there, staring at my bedroom doorway. The light from the dining room was spilling into the hall, but nothing was there. Nothing moved. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had just entered the hallway. Something was standing right outside my door, waiting. The panic was overwhelming. I became hyper-aware of everything. My own breathing, my heartbeat, and then something happened that still haunts me. My vision started to feel distorted. The room seemed to tilt slightly. The light in the hallway looked wrong. I felt dizzy, not from being sick, but from sheer, intense terror. Then came the scratching. It was slow and methodical, and it was coming from inside my room. At first, I thought I was losing it, but then it happened again. A long, heavy scrape against wood. I knew exactly where it was. My grandfather kept a wooden gun cabinet in the corner, and the scratching was coming from right there. I could hear something dragging itself across the front of it. Long, rhythmic scratches, one after another. I could even hear the cabinet door shifting slightly against the frame, as if something was pressing against it, testing its strength. I tried to scream, but my throat completely locked up. The scratching went on and on. I don't know how long it lasted. Maybe seconds, maybe minutes. Finally, I managed to suck in enough air to let out a piercing scream. The noise stopped instantly. Within seconds, my grandfather came rushing in. The cabinet looked perfectly normal. The hallway was empty. Everything looked exactly as it should. I tried to explain what was happening, but he didn't really believe me. To him, it was just a nightmare or an overactive imagination, but I knew I had been awake. I knew what I heard. I couldn't sleep normally that night. I ended up draping a bedsheet over the side of the bed and curling up underneath it, wrapping myself tightly in blankets, putting on headphones, and turning my back to the door, refusing to look at anything else. If there was actually something in that room, I didn't want to face it. The next morning, my grandfather brought the whole thing up casually while talking to my grandmother. I fully expected her to just laugh it off, but instead, she looked right at me and said something that made my stomach sink. "Oh, that's funny," she said. "Your cousin said the exact same thing." Apparently, the last time my cousin stayed over, she woke my grandmother up in a total panic in the middle of the night, insisting she could hear footsteps pacing upstairs. No one had ever mentioned this to me before. For the rest of that trip, I slept on the floor every single night. And over the years, the footsteps haven't stopped. It's not just a one-off thing. It happens every single time I stay there. They always start in that same room upstairs, pacing from one end to the other, before finally stopping. I've learned to live with it now, or at least as well as anyone can. I sleep with my headphones on, my back turned to the door, trying my best not to think about what's directly above me. The footsteps still happen, but ever since that first night, they've never once come down the stairs. At least, not while I was awake. And honestly, I don't know which thought is scarier. That whatever it is never actually came downstairs, or that maybe it did, and I was just too terrified to look.